Jerry Gray, thank you for taking time out to be with us today. How are you?
Good evening. Good evening. I'm very well, thank you. And thanks for the invite. I'm not sure how I'm going to help your listeners.
All right. Well, I love the guitar collection. Nice. So can you play a few riffs during the show?
No, I actually recently broke both wrists and haven't picked up a guitar in 2 years, but I have a nice collection.
Okay, I thought maybe you could do a little Hendrix for us. So Jerry, I came across you on YouTube, and it was during Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, which stirred up a hornet's nest, which I still don't understand why it was necessary. And I watched one of your videos, and I thought, it'd be nice for people here in the States to get a view from someone on the ground like you in China. So let me ask you, where did you immigrate from before you moved from China? Where'd you come from?
Born and grew up in the UK. I left the UK when I was 28, went to Australia, and from Australia 18 years ago, yesterday was my anniversary in China. I've been here 18 years.
Okay, and your motivation for moving to China, what was the appeal? Was it like a dream you had that you wanted to live there, or
Not at all.
Business
Nothing.
take you there?
Nothing like that. I was a general manager of a large multinational division of a multinational organization, which many of your listeners would know. It was taken over by the United Technologies Corporation, UTC. And as a result of their takeover, they didn't need all the managers that they had. And I was offered a redundancy. I took that. I went back to college, learned how to be a teacher, and came to China for an 8-month contract as an English teacher. And I never left. So that was my motivation. My plan was to actually get a bit of experience living, working, teaching, and then move on. And I kind of hoped I would end up in the Americas at the time, but
Interesting.
I still haven't been. Still haven't been to there.
So who was she?
Yes, I am now married. But my decision to stay was interesting because I went looking for another job, which was where I met my wife. So yeah, a lot of people think that I stayed because of her. Not true. We met because I decided to stay. The other thing people say is, "Oh, her English is so good because she's married to you." No, it was as good as that before we met. Okay. So yeah, it was. It's a love story come true. And she's listening.
Okay, well, I always tell people to count their blessings. That's a great one. And
yeah, we got lucky.
Although you had to really travel from your home country to find your soulmate, that's how it. That's very romantic. There's a book in there, Jerry. So, what was the major reason that you decided to stay after that contract was done?
I simply like living here. I mean, at the time, it wasn't that I planned to stay here forever. It's just that I thought, well, China is such a diverse country. It really is. And in those days, China was a very popular country with the rest of the world.
Yes.
I felt that there was a lot more traveling I needed to do, a lot more places I needed to see. And I wanted to just do a couple more years. And that would be enough, I thought, at the time. To this day, I'm still not bored with China. I've traveled across from the East Coast to the western borders. I've traveled from the north of the country to the south, and I've done it all on bicycles. So I've really seen China on the ground, right at the ground level, talking to people in their little shops and stopping at the side of the road in a rural village bus stop to take a rest. So yeah, it was quite an interesting change. I never rode a bike until. I rode a bike as a kid going to and from school, but came to China and about 8 years ago decided I wanted to ride to Tibet. Now, that never happened. I've still not ridden to Tibet, but I rode a bicycle all the way across China, right the way through Xinjiang. And I've done that twice now, once from the east to the west and once from the west to the east.
Okay, after the show, you have to tell me about your vitamin regime, and
you like to try it. I drink beer and I eat whatever's available.
I was going to guess that. Yeah. So let's talk about. I get skeptical when the Republicans and the Democrats in the United States agree on something.
Mhm.
And there's really only one thing they agree on, and that's their hawkish stance with China. And the first video I saw of yours, you addressed their COVID policy in China and the lockdowns. And, you know, we see things like people running to get away so they're not locked in. You know, we've seen stories of people in hotel rooms and feeling like prisoners. You have a different take on the zero COVID tolerance. Why don't you share it with our audience?
Well, the first thing to do is to understand that there is a psychological difference between Chinese people and American people. American people value their freedoms. Chinese people value their communal style of working together. So a Chinese person who says, what's the best thing I can do for my community? An American person may say, what's the best thing I can do for myself? Now that generalizes, but there are things called dimensions of culture, national dimensions of culture, and Chinese people are more communal than American people who are more individualistic culture. And I think most people don't understand that, and they say, if you force me to lock down, then I will resent that. Whereas Chinese people say, well, if I have to lock down, I might have some complaints about it, but it's for the good of the community, so I'll do it. And the difference is basic and it is fundamental. Chinese people, generally speaking, will, I mean, obviously no one wants to be locked down. They will complain about it, but they will not complain, most of them. And I ask this on a daily basis still. We're 2.5, nearly 3 years into this COVID epidemic, and we still have occasional lockdowns. The city I live in, Zhongshan City, has one right now where there are 8 cases, but they are all inside of one street. The street is locked down, not the city. The suburb isn't even locked down, just the street. And that's what they're doing now with lockdowns. They're much more surgical. Now, of course, everyone will say, that's not what happened in Shanghai. And of course, it's not. The reason it's not what happened in Shanghai is because Shanghai felt they could handle it differently. And they said, we're not locking down, we will lock down in 4 days' time. And we'll only lock down this area, and then we'll lock down another area. And it was completely the wrong approach to take if you want a COVID dynamic zero, which is what China is aiming for, because COVID was by then out in the community. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware of this. Not one person in China has died of COVID in the last 3 months. And until Shanghai, there were 2 people who were both in their 80s, died in a city called Shenyang, which is way, way in the north of China. And those 2 people were the first 2 people to die for more than a year. I think it was 16 months without a death from COVID or with COVID inside of China before that happened. And since then, since Shanghai, not one person has died of COVID. So that tells you that something is being done correctly. Whereas in the United States now, I don't know the numbers, and I don't think anyone does, because some states have stopped counting. And then there's the issue of, did this person die with COVID? Did this person die of COVID? The simple fact is, in China, they're trying to stop people from getting COVID, so no one has that dispute. Did this person die with, or did this person die of? The bottom line is, no one has died with or of COVID for the last 3 months that I'm aware of anywhere in China. And people say, well, can you believe them? Can you believe those statistics? The truth is, yes, I can. Now, I'm a media watcher. I'm a social media commentator. I read all of the newspapers inside of China, and I read them, analyze them, research them, write about them, and I write for them as well. And I can assure you, they don't tell lies. Having said that, they don't tell all the truth. They will leave out what they want to leave out, but they will not tell you a lie. And that's the one thing I can say about Chinese media. If you want to know what's going on in China, read Chinese media. Now, it doesn't mean you know everything that's going on, but you do know the truth of what they're telling you. Yes, they do leave things out. They leave out anything that's potentially harmful to the community. They leave out everything that's potentially insulting. You're not allowed to insult. You're not allowed hate speech. You're not allowed incitement. You're not allowed to do all of the things that American people say, well, that's my right, that's my freedom. Chinese people don't have that, and that much is true. But by the same token, 1.4 billion of them don't expect that. They don't really want that. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't Chinese people who say, I don't like this. But the Edelman, what's it called? The Edelman Trust Barometer, which recently came out, showed that Chinese trust in the government is 91%. American trust hovers around about the 50%. China's trust in the government, according to the Harvard Ash research from 2 years ago, was 95.5%. So what does that tell you? Chinese people generally speaking, trust their government. And I know lots and lots of Chinese people, and I know that they trust their government. They actually like living in the way that they live. So there's the big difference between our two communities, if you like. The American community, it doesn't trust its government. It doesn't believe its government. The Chinese people say, well, I don't want to be locked down. And if I am locked down, I'm going to try and avoid it as best as possible. But when I am locked down, I won't complain about the policy. I'll complain about the inconvenience. And yet,
Jerry, there are some stories of people that, are not happy there, that will leave and travel several continents and come up through Mexico to come to the U.S. Of the people that you met, aren't there people that are unhappy and discontent and feel repression at all? Are you saying that everyone, 95%, do not feel repressed? Go ahead.
I'm saying that every single person that I know who is Chinese, of course they have their day-to-day issues, the same as you and I do. They've got to find money for this or find some way of getting around the particular problem that they've got. They have domestic problems, the same as everybody else in the world. But their problem is not with China, not with the government. The people that you're talking about, if they're coming in through Mexico, why are they coming in through Mexico? They can just get a visa. Why are they traveling across countries like that? There is no mass refugee. There is no mass refugee from, or a refugee problem from
everyone's
any
free
part
to
of China.
leave if they can get a visa.
Currently, no. Currently, no. And I mean, this is a small, a minor issue that is based on COVID. Chinese government is not issuing new passports because they don't want to encourage people to travel. So people are saying, well, I can't get a passport, I'm banned from leaving. Well, everyone is the same. My wife has a passport, and if we wanted to leave, we can leave. Can we come back? There's the issue. We don't want to leave because we may not be able to come back. If you currently have a passport, you can leave, but you may not be able to come back. And that's the issue. People are saying, well, they're banning me from traveling. They're not banning people from traveling. They're just saying, we don't want to give passports out because we're not encouraging travel. And so people are applying for passports and being rejected. If you don't have a valid reason to get a passport issued right now, and a really valid reason, business people can get it, obviously government officials can, but the fact is, if you haven't got a valid reason to leave China, they're saying don't leave China because it's not safe out there, and we're not going to let you back in without restrictions. You're coming back in and you're going into quarantine, and we don't want that many people coming in and quarantine. How do they manage tens of thousands of people coming in, as used to happen? 1 million people a week coming in just through Beijing, 10 million people a year coming in through Beijing airport, one Beijing, and there are 3 of them. Wow. So you've got to start looking at numbers like that. You can't accommodate them in a quarantine, and that's the reason behind it. I mean, there's a lot of other issues that people say, oh, look, he's being welded into his apartment. Not true. Nobody got welded into their individual apartment. They blocked the spare entry exit points of all, including my own gardens. I live in a park, effectively. It's quite a large community. There are 12 entrances to my community. They blocked 10 of them, so that people who were coming and going were monitored going in, coming out while we were in lockdown. Because during a lockdown for us, we were allowed out. One person from each residence was allowed out with a permit for 3 hours every 2 days. And so they wanted to control that. So they blocked off the extra doorways. So when you see these reports about someone was welded into their apartments, that's not true. an apartment door was welded to stop people from going out there, to funnel them through a place where they could be controlled.
Okay, are there, we're hearing rumblings that China's considering reopening and moving away from, is that a possibility? You already consider them open.
Well, China internally is not even open.
Okay.
I was supposed to be in Hunan province last week. It got cancelled.
Okay.
We're going to be allowed to go in 2 weeks' time. I'm due to go to Hainan Island the day after, on Tuesday of next week. Now we're worried that that may get cancelled because it's been cancelled once before. So China's not fully open yet. When you do travel, there are restrictions on where you go, how you get there. You need to have this QR code on your phone. It's very well tracked.
Is that based upon social credit score? Does that exist in China? I knew I'd get it. Huh?
My next video is about social credit score. There is no such thing as a social credit score in China. It's a media myth. Let me just put this back into perspective. I'm going to backtrack a little bit and tell you 98% of what you read, see, or hear about China in mainstream media is wrong. Now, there is a 2% kernel of truth in almost everything. There is no social credit score. What you have in China is you have a financial credit score, the same as you have in America. Every developed country has that. You want to borrow money, you have to prove you can pay it back. They also have the telephone system, the mobile phone system. Every single person in China has a smartphone. I mean, there's 2.5 billion smartphones in operation in China at the moment, and only 1.5 billion people. So our smartphone is registered to our identification. In my case, my passport. In my wife's case, her ID. Now, if she breaks the law, then there will be points added to her driving license if she breaks the law, and that reflects on the telephone system. It lets her know, you have just been clocked going through a red light or a speed camera or whatever. Here's what you need to do. You need to go and pay this fine at this place by this time, and you've just been docked 2 points. You then have an opportunity to say, well, it wasn't me driving, it was my husband, and I will get the message to go and pay the fine. So
would you take the fall for your wife on that?
Well, the truth is we don't even have a car, so
all right.
But it depends. If we had a car and one of us was near the end of losing our license, one of us would take the fall. But sure, this is a complete myth. Now, what there is in terms of social credit, we were involved in charity, and when we go to do any charity activities, we're encouraged to sign on to an app. When we sign on, it recognizes that we're doing a good deed. When we do this good deed, it gives us a point. So we can get points for doing good deeds, which then, if we get caught driving too fast or jaywalking or whatever,
it washes
those points
out.
Can be deducted. So it's actually very beneficial. Now, the other thing is, if you want your child to go to a better school, then you need to prove that your family is a good family. So you get points. So it's a positive thing. It's never been a negative thing. It's designed to create a harmonious society where people are encouraged to help other people. And it does that very well. And if you say to any Chinese person, what's your social credit score? They'll go, Shema? Huh? Tibudong. I don't understand. What are you talking about? That's what they would say to you. They have no idea.
Let me ask you, Jerry, did you invest in any Chinese real estate over the last decade?
Yeah, I own 2 apartments. Well, my wife owns 1 and I own 1 apartment,
have they taken a hit and a drawdown like the stories we hear about ghost cities? And is it true that, I know I knew I'd make you laugh through this whole interview. What about the stories of people that have lost, life savings in real estate and certain rural banks? They weren't able, there were bank runs. What's your knowledge of that from being on the ground?
Again, 2% of truth, 98% of myth. Yes, there have been, and there always will be, rogue speculations going on. There is no such thing as a ghost city. Those ghost cities are pre-planned cities, which will be, and I mean, I've seen these videos of ghost cities and I've cycled through them, where you cycle through for 30, 40, 50 minutes. And I mean, you don't see a single person. It's just thousands of apartments. Go back 3 years later, it's a thriving metropolis. And I can guarantee that because I've done it. I've actually cycled through places in Ningxia and Gansu that are exactly that. And if anyone knows China, Ningxia and Gansu are the far northwest of China. They are really, really remote places. And the ghost cities are not ghost cities. They are pre-planned urban metropolises to alleviate the urban sprawls of cities like Beijing, Shenzhen, Guangzhou. 20 million people can fancy pass to go there, and that fires up the local economy. So it's actually
bank runs.
The bank run was not actually a bank. And it was, I think it was in Henan or Hebei. I'm not sure now. It was just a few months ago, this bank run. It wasn't actually a bank. It was a rogue department. Yeah, it was a credit company. It was a rogue credit company. The small investors are all guaranteed by the banks, the big banks, to get their money back. The speculators are not. And this is what China does. It doesn't encourage you to speculate. It doesn't stop you investing in your future or buying property. It wants you to do that because they don't have a very well-developed superannuation system here. You do have superannuation. You do have social security. Every single employee has a social security, unemployment insurance, health insurance. Every single employee has that. And I would say that the industrial relation laws here are even stronger. Not even, they're much stronger than Australia and the UK. They are now stronger. When I first came here, they were not. They were totally underdeveloped. Now they are much stronger than when I left Australia. And since I left Australia, industrial relation laws have eroded. So employees are happier, healthier, safer in terms of what they do. Now, yeah, a lot of people lost their job because of COVID, but nobody lost their job and has been forced onto the streets. There is no homelessness problem in China. There is no longer a poverty problem in China. There are still poor people. For sure, there are many poor people. There's a lot of people in China. But the difference between here and in America, every single person is getting better every year. In America, more and more people are falling into poverty or falling into ill health, falling into homelessness, falling into unemployment. The opposite is happening here. I can absolutely understand why your Democrats and your Republicans both agree, because they are the ones who've led you down this track. And you're in a situation now where you cannot say, look at China, it's wonderful, because the moment you say that, people will say, well, why aren't we the richest country in the world? And we have a per capita GDP of $12,000 here. You have 67,000, but you're 67,000 by about 100 people. If you take a look at who the richest top 100 people are and how much they got, there's your GDP. The difference here is equality. And the National Congress, which just took place, was taking place now, has actually put that into future legislation.
So is that why they went after people like, is that why they went after people like Jack Ma and took down a lot of tech companies? Is because of you know, really the wealth disparity, by addressing wealth disparity? That was an example that
that was part of it. The Jack Ma thing was not about that. Personally, I don't think they took down Jack Ma. I think what they did was they stopped Ant Finance. Now, Ant Finance is something very similar to what you have in the West: micro loans, payday loans.
You get the interest will bury you.
Well, I just looked at one, and I've been asked to write an article about this. And I just, before we were talking, I was online looking at some interest rates in Australia and in the UK. In the UK, I found one. The interest rate is 1,298% per annum. That's payday loan, 1,298% interest.
Is that usury?
Or the equivalent of.
Is that usury?
Well, I mean, I would say that's predatory. I don't know the right word for it. But, you know, if I am poor and I need help to get through to next week's payday, I do not want to be borrowing at a minimum of 49% interest. Interest rates vary between 49% and 1,1300%. But if you're poor, is that helping you? And that was the danger of what Ant Finance was likely to do. That was the danger. Now, I'm not suggesting Ant Finance would have done that, but they were outside of the regulatory banking system, and they were going to be offering microloans without banking protection. Now, one thing I will say about China, another thing that is positive, they absolutely protect the small guy. They protect the little guy. They will not allow predatory practices. They will not allow price gouging. A great example, when we had the pandemic and we were in lockdown, a local pharmacy chain in Beijing, 30 pharmacies, were selling masks at something like 300 RMB per box when they were supposed to cost 18 RMB per box. That pharmacy chain is shut down, gone. It doesn't exist anymore. That's what happens. That's what they do to predatory practices inside China.
I just a couple of other topics I want to touch on and wish we had more time, but can you explain to us what's happening to the, I'm not sure if I pronounce it correctly, the Uyghurs, the Muslims that live in China that are in retraining camps?
They're not.
They're not.
That's it. They're not. It is I'm not going to say it's a complete lie. I'm going to say there are problems in Xinjiang. Xinjiang is not a province. It's an autonomous region. It's a region that is managed by the Uyghur people. I've been there several times, most recently in 2019, at the height of these, what they call troubles. Previous to that, 2014, both times on a bicycle. So I didn't fly in, look at the tourist spots and fly out. I cycled approximately each time more than 3 or 4. The first time more than 5,000 kilometers, the second time 3,000 or 4,000 kilometers. The first time we went all the way to the border of Kazakhstan. I have seen absolutely no evidence whatsoever of oppression. I've seen no evidence of persecution. The Uyghur language is alive, well, and thriving, and they speak it all the time.
What are those structures that we see? Are they fabricated? They look like...
No. Well, let me explain this. This is very, very easy to explain. And I'm dealing with people I speak with. I'm trying to protect China's interests here for no reason other than the stories are wrong. There are two experts in this. One of them is a guy called Nathan Russo, who works for an organization called ASPI, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. The other one is a guy called Adrian Zenz, who works for the Victims of Communism. Now, these two people, one's in America, he's German, the other one's in Australia, and he's just a kid. Neither of them have set foot in Xinjiang. If they have, I know for a fact Nathan Russo has never been to China, the Australian one. The German one came here in, I think, 1997 for 10-day holidays. So 1997, 10-day holiday, he didn't get the experience he needed. So all the photos, someone said, all the photos, testimonies outside of China are fake. No, they're not fake. The photos of those buildings that you see, the photos of the buildings that you see are real buildings. They're not fake buildings. But what they don't do is take into account Chinese culture. Chinese people build factories, they build schools, they build hospitals, and they build fences around them, and they put a gatepost on the outside. In the city I live in, which is 4,500 kilometers from Xinjiang, where the Uyghurs live, every school, every factory, every hospital, every single place where large numbers of people congregate has a security gate, a fence around the outside. Factory workers live in dormitories, school kids live in dormitories. You have to understand the size of this country, especially in places like Xinjiang, but everywhere, kids live in school. They live in dormitories. So the analysis is this. We're looking at a building here which has many small rooms with steel doors and bars on the window. Yep, it's a secure dormitory. We're looking at a building which has a fence line all the way around the outside and a police box on the front. Yes, it's a school or it's a factory. 98% of everything you have ever read about Xinjiang and the Uyghurs and the oppression, or the persecution, or the genocide is wrong. It's misinterpreted. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't people who don't have a story to tell. For sure, there is a massive amount of security in that region. Massive. Security is there because they had dozens, if not hundreds, of terrorist offenses. Hundreds of people have been killed in that region, including many Uyghurs. Now, this is what gets forgotten. The World Bank has been there to help out. The World Bank helps to fund these re-education centers. They are vocational training centers. They're not prisons. Now, you get a choice. If you are in poverty and someone is trying to radicalize you, what are you going to do? You're going to either go one way or the other. What China is doing is saying, well, come here, we'll train you, we'll give you a job, we'll lift you out of poverty. And the poverty rate in Xinjiang has gone right through the roof. There is no more poverty, massive amounts of poverty alleviation as they've built new schools, new colleges, new hospitals, new factories. They've moved factories from the West. They've also moved Uyghurs from the West into the East to try and give them jobs so they can send money home. The idea of slave labor in the cotton picking. Here's another thing. Look this up yourself. John Deere has the world's largest cotton picking machine factory in China. The world's largest is in China, selling cotton picking machines to Xinjiang, where 87% of China's cotton is grown. It's a complete farce. Now, the other thing is that China's cotton has been sanctioned by the Better Cotton Institute or Better Cotton Industry, the organization that is there to check to make sure that there are no breaches, found no breaches in 12 years of checking. And then suddenly got taken over. The chair of the Better Cotton Institute, Better Cotton Industry, the chair is the same chair of a huge cotton conglomerate in America. And America's cotton has been suffering. Now, you're an investor. You can look all this up and find out what happened. The chair of the institute that suggested there may be, not there are, there may be some human rights abuses, is also the chair of the largest cotton conglomerate in America. And now we have sanctions on Chinese cotton. I've been there. There's no issues. There are no issues at all except for an enhanced security.
Okay, let me ask you this, Jerry. Is there anything that you don't like about being there? And if it was any criticism, and would you feel comfortable criticizing the government on a YouTube video like this and say something that the government might consider disparaging?
Well, not about the government, and I don't feel comfortable with it. There is very little to criticize. When I came here, this government was as corrupt as hell. There were huge dinners, huge meals, lots of expensive wines, and I was invited to many of them, and I saw what was going on. You couldn't get a hospital appointment without paying somebody money to get that appointment. Yeah, it was massively corrupt. It is no longer that way. Anyone who comes to China will experience that for themselves. You read about China, you won't. Now, do I criticize? Yes, I do. I've criticized the COVID lockdowns. I've criticized the way they've been handled, not the lockdown itself, not the strategy. But I do criticize how individuals handle it. Yes, I have criticisms all the time. If I have a criticism, and you can do this, anyone in China can do this, in the city that you're in, you dial the number 12345, and you'll get put through to a complaints or suggestions hotline. And I guarantee you something will happen as a result of it. We have a few problems. One of the problems I do criticize China about, hotels. It's very hard for a foreigner to find a hotel that will accept them now. It used to be much easier, but they've always been, because of COVID. My wife can go into a hotel as soon as see my face to say, sorry, no foreigners. Now, that's actually illegal. And so I make a complaint to the 12345 telephone number and it gets fixed. You can complain, you can criticize. Everyone on WeChat is criticizing the government. If you go onto WeChat or Weibo and you can speak Chinese or read and write Chinese, you'll see there's criticisms all over the place. Anybody who wants to criticize, anybody can. Now, what you can't do, antagonize, you can't hate speech, you can't insult. When you start insulting people, you're going to get cut off. When you start antagonizing or trying to raise people into a protest, you're going to get cut off. But you've seen yourself, people can and do protest inside of China because that's what they did when they had the run on the bank. It wasn't the bank,
That's right.
the credit.
That's correct.
They had a protest. So no one's in prison as a result of that. The government has changed the rules as a result of it. So people can protest, and when they do, the government listens. This is the most cooperative and collaborative government I've seen in my life. Now, I was a police officer in the UK. I worked on the miners' strike. I know what harsh government policies are. I've seen them. I lived through the IRA bombing campaign in London, and I've seen the results of that. I do know what I'm talking about. And I tell you, 18 years of observing here, every single year is getting better. Do I have complaints? Yes. Do I voice them? Yes, absolutely. I actually have the telephone number of the local city's Foreign Affairs Bureau. Call them up and say, hey, did you know what? And I can tell him my complaints. Sorry about that, Jerry. I'll get onto that straight away.
Well, you know what, Jerry, it's a great conversation. You know, whether or not governments are hostile to each other, I believe that as citizens of the world, that we can have dialogue with people from every place and get the picture. And I think it's important that people communicate with people so they, you know, that maybe we're really not adversaries. The people aren't. It's what's happening between governments. And I appreciate you spending time. I'd love to do it again because we have to address Taiwan.
Can I just finish on one point, Dale? Can I just finish on one point?
Yeah.
If you watch what the Chinese government says, read what they say, and then consider what they have done. China has never invaded anyone, not since 1979, and that was only a 3-week invasion. The South China Sea thing, the Hong Kong thing, they are all Western media constructs. They are not real situations. Hong Kong people want to be Chinese. Taiwanese people, some of them don't, some of them do. It's an entirely different story. There is no question about Taiwan being part of China, the United Nations, the United States. They all agree it's one China. The geopolitics of it get in the way, and that's for a much bigger argument. But yeah, look at what China says they're going to do, and then look at what they've done. And then say to yourself, do they really look like they're going to invade? No, they're not going to invade. It's not in their nature. It's not in their history. And that's the only thing I can say to people. Everything you read, everything you see, 98% of it is misunderstanding, misinterpretation, or outright lies. That's the problem that you're facing at the moment. Everything you read about China, China did not invade Tibet. Tibet was part of China. The Dalai Lama even says that. Someone's making that comment. China did not invade Tibet. It's part of China. And it's an autonomous region which has been lifted out of poverty too. Anyone who wants to go there can go there and see for themselves. Ask the Tibetans in China, ask the Chinese in China. Don't listen to people overseas who are paid by the National Endowment for Democracy or the CIA.
Okay, well, you know what, Jerry, I really appreciate it. I believe in keeping an open mind, and it was very nice meeting you. I hope that you and I can talk again because we need information, and we're better to get information about China than from someone who's lived there and understands our lifestyle as well. So, Jerry, it's a service you're providing. I'm
getting the comments, and you're going to see them. I'm on the CCP payroll.
Yeah.
The issue is this: try and prove anything that I've said is wrong, and I'll accept that. Try and prove that anything I've said is wrong. Now, the only way to do that is to ask Chinese people in China, and you'll find that this CCP role, I'm brainwashed, etc., etc. It's your media, your politicians.
You know, Jerry, I have a rule here, and I'm seeing people break it. I said, you know, you could disagree with the guests, but we show our guests respect, and I respect you for being here, and I can't control what people are texting, but I think it takes courage for you to do what you're doing, and appreciate you expressing your experience in China with us today.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. I'm Jerry. My name is Blake Morrow. I'm the. Hey, how are you? Thanks for spending your time with us. I I'm actually, I was born in Taiwan, so I'm half Chinese myself. I just wanted to say even though we actually have to start our next show for our ForexAnalytix customers here in just a few minutes, but I just want to say thanks for taking the time and spending it with us. I know Dale's already said that, but I just wanted to express it to you because I think it's always great. You know, we have a very international team here with people all over the world that work with the ForexAnalytix community. And it's nice to have a boots on the ground perspective, especially in a country like China. So
Yeah,
thank you
get a
very
room
much.
ready for me, Jerry.
You're welcome.
All right.
You'll be welcome.
All right. So
Over
that's
here
it,
for that
everyone.
beer.
All right. Really appreciate you being and staying up at night. And
It's only 9 o'clock.
999 was I hope you had fun at your friend's wedding. 999 was the date.
Yeah,
and
that's true. Yeah, we missed that one.
is
Thank
3
you.
a big number too in China, Jerry? Because
3, not really. 6 is, 9 is, 4 is a bad number. 8 is a very lucky number.
okay. All right. Thank you very much.
No
Jerry
problem.
Gray,
Thanks,
everybody. Adios.
Bye.
Or how do I say goodbye in Mandarin?
Dan.
Bye-bye.
Dan. Bye-bye.
Hi, Chen.
Hey traders, this is Blake Morrow with ForexAnalytix. Thanks for stopping by our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like these videos, share them, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of the content that we provide here for free. Thanks for stopping by. I'll see you in the next video.